Okay.
Fortunately,
You're
we
good to
have a guest room that's all prepared and everything, so we can host pretty much anybody in the drop of a hat.
go. All right. We are ready.
All right, well, our first thing that we want to do is, the 30,000 foot overview. And so we'll do we'll mark out your chapters.
Okay.
And then we'll dig into, each chapter and talk about each one. Your first chapter is going to be like an intro and your motivation. You'll have like a short intro at the beginning that's, maybe your own little preface, where, you'll be kind of personal and you'll just talk about why you decided to write the book. That's different from an introduction. Introduction is where you really get into the meat of it, and this is where you're going to hook them and convince them this is why you should spend your time with this. And I don't know if you've thought about chapter titles, but if you have a chapter title that pops into mind, let's get it up there.
I haven't, I've thought about it, but nothing, comes to mind. Perhaps maybe if I put over here this this sort of thing. So we've got, of course, we've got Christ right here, and then here is the so again, that's personal, business, financial, relational, spiritual, and then Christ obviously is over that. So my thought was, the intro, somewhere here, and then the conclusion, or now what, over there.
Yep.
So I think you're talking about over here, the why.
Yeah, that's going to be in your introduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's in here.
Right.
Okay.
Why you should be doing this.
Okay.
Yeah. And why this is important, why it's crucial, why you cannot avoid this book.
So some of the things that, for example, that I would do is, and this isn't perfectly refined or anything like that, but I would have under each one, certain key, grab that if you want, key concepts or what have you. Kind of like here, this is the overview of the coaching program.
Okay.
So
we're getting the meat of it here.
Yeah.
All right. So here we're doing the, it's just before this. So I'm going to set this here.
Sure.
When you and I were talking, one of the angles that you came at, I believe, was this idea of regrets.
That's exactly it.
And what people do with regrets, and you just talk about that a little bit again.
Sure. How I got to that spot is having about the past 7 years of working with men in their business. I had a lot of interaction with them, and I would always kind of share with them the way I see the world. But what would happen is, after one relationship with, and I'm talking about many guys, we're in the hundreds, that I had to interact with them personally and help them to grow their business life. So what would happen is, we would see that they had regrets. They're not bad guys. They're not out for anything malicious. They didn't wake up and just decide to do something really bad. It's just that they weren't on their way to the end result that they wanted. And everything that I've read and everything that I've seen is most men in America today end their life with regrets. And it's not because that's what they intend on doing. It's just that each and every day they're walking down a pathway without a plan to make that not happen. So, in summary, the book begins where our life ends.
Okay.
And for many men in America today, or most men, especially in America, end their life with regrets. I wish I'd have done this. I wish I'd have done more things of significance.
That right there, if you're outlining a chapter, chapter 1 for the introduction comes right in there. So what I'm thinking is you grab them right in here with the story of one particular person that you can think of that illustrates this really well, where you tell his story, and you tell that story in a way that your reader can go, okay, that's me. that's me, that's me, that's me. Ooh, look what happened to him.
Mhm.
So, here's your, pick, and fictionalize it, meaning everything is true except for the name and then identifying details.
Okay.
So you just remove, like if he's got 4 children, names, you just take out the names.
Okay.
He's got 4 children. He was a successful business executive of a major corporation, or, so you're not identifying him specifically, but you do want it to be somebody specific that you have in mind as you tell that story.
What's so neat about that is, there's several stories that I could tell. One of the end of the road stories that's completely opposite to that, that's an end of the road story that I would love to have for myself, is about 6 years ago, we were invited to Zig Ziglar's 80th birthday. And it was a life-changing experience because it was in a big ballroom, and it was a lot of hoopla and stuff. But the coolest thing was they had big video screens. I'm talking Megatrons, right? And while we were having dessert, they had people from all over the world live saying. Or they'd recorded it,
Right.
but they were saying, Zig, happy birthday, wish I could be there with you to celebrate it, and this is the difference that you made in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I see, the end of the road for most, and then I see, Zig, and if he were here today, he'd probably say, well, maybe there was a couple things I could have done differently. But that was kind of like the polarization,
Right.
Regret and then a life of significance, because people from all over the world were calling in and saying, you made such a difference in my life. And let me tell you why.
Well, here, this is where you're going to insert that story.
Gotcha.
So what you'll have is you'll have this story here, where you're talking about the story of regret. Make it as specific as you can, with this particular individual. And then you're going to say what you just said there. Most people live like this guy. Most people live with these regrets. And it's everything you just said, and you just got it recorded right there. So everything you just said would basically go right here. So now you've told them what not to do. Now you're going to give an example of somebody who did it well, who didn't end, who did have that life of significance, and we all have our little places of regrets, but on balance, is your life a life of significance, and do you feel like and other people to attest to that? And then here's where you say, this is where we're going to go with the book. This is why you need to read this book, because we want you to have a life like this right here. So, and here's where you give them a short overview of, I'm going to break this down, I'm going to make it simple, I'm going to make it uncomplicated, I'm going to make it actionable, I'm going to make it something that you can do, and we're going to take it piece by piece and step by step along the way, and I promise you this will not overwhelm you,
Perfect.
And that's what you're going to do in this right here, which launches them into that next chapter. So then here's chapter 2.
And part of that usability and the economy of the words and concepts is, this is not a book that was meant to be read cover to cover, one page at a time, sequentially.
Right.
Feel free, based on, I think maybe where we're going here is, well, maybe not, maybe more the workbook, but it's taking a look at the man in the mirror and assessing where you are in each of those areas of your life, right? And if we have ephemeral bleed somewhere, then we triage those areas and we handle those first. So, if, for example, in your life, your relational area of your life is, let's just say, in need of some resuscitation, I don't want you working on your personal goals.
Right.
But that's the hand. So
Well, let's hold on to that, because that's a great idea for something that we can do for this chapter 2. Here, I think that's no, I think you're. That's in chapter 2. When they get ready to do chapter 2, here is where you do Paretos, never spell it. Paretos Principle, okay, where you talk about that, that's really helpful for guys.
Yeah.
Hugely helpful. It's like, oh, okay, so I don't have to do everything.
Right.
I can focus on some of the important things, and here you can talk about exactly what you said. While I'm going to give it out in this sequence, there's another thing that men tend to do, which is not a good thing, is we tend to we tend to go to our areas where we are already adequate.
Yeah.
And we just ignore the places where we're not so adequate because it doesn't make us feel good, and make us feel powerful, or make us feel competent or whatever.
Right.
So avoid that.
Resist the temptation
mm-hmm.
to strengthen your strengths.
Right, exactly. And then you might, for me, it's always the guy in the gym,
Sure.
Who's like this, and the legs, he doesn't like the legs. I'm strong in my legs, I'm weak in my upper body, so I love the leg exercises. So
sure, look at me, look at my legs. Yeah. As we're talking about that, I don't know where this lies, but man facts. Like I don't know if it's called like a little box or.
Yeah, you can do what's called it's a sidebar is so like if you have your page running, you can have what's called a sidebar.
Because that's the thing. That's where I want to put those. Most men. I can pause that if you need. Here's the common stumbling blocks for men. Mm-hmm. So as you look at, we can even start over. Put it over here. Let me share with you. We are in a battle. Okay, and that battle is first of all for you to come to Christ, right? Eternal salvation. But then the other battle is so that you take nobody with you. So the adversary is going to be pounding on you to make you ineffective, right? So that you have no influence. And the way he's going to do is he's going to get you all scrambled up. So here's the major weapons by the adversary that he's going to use so you don't work on your life. Mm-hmm. So just be aware as you're reading through this, tinkering, strengthening,
right.
All those types of things.
Yeah, look, when you do these right here, if you keep that to 150 to 200 words, it'll fit neatly in a sidebar box. And anytime you can do bullets and anything visual in those is very helpful.
Let me just put this over here so I don't forget. This is a big concept. You got the story, and this is, let me do it like this. Oops. This is just one of those helpful concepts. Okay. Life, afterlife. Life, afterlife. So that is a paradigm of how you see the world. Most men are living a life where afterlife there's nothing, or something very short. Where we want to be is we want to shift to know that this is where, this is what we're living our life for. That's the reason to put this in place.
Right. Your target audience is going to be men who may not be saved, or men who are spiritually immature.
Yeah.
In which case you'll probably want to put that concept somewhere, in
Spiritual?
in here. Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't lead with it.
Okay.
Because it'll mark your book as a spiritual book, where and it is, because it's infused all the way through.
Yes.
That you don't want them to marginalize it and go, oh, okay.
Got it.
Yeah. No, this is just a religious book. Because you'll pigeonhole yourself.
Can we say that in the front end?
You can say whatever you want, but absolutely, yeah. You as part of, you might even put that in your preface.
Yeah.
Your part where you're saying, hey, for me personally, this is why I decided to write this. It's where you do your acknowledgments to, where I decided I wanted to write this, and while this is not a Christian book, it is infused with Christianity throughout, because this is who I am. And I believe this is the foundation of life. This is what the Bible says. These are my beliefs. And so it rests on a Christian foundation. So even while we're talking about business, you need to know that this is infused with the cross. This concept here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
Yeah, because
you can kind of give your paradigm, in here. But it's all, and then you stop talking about you, and then you go right into here, and you're talking about them.
Okay.
And then absolutely put that in the spiritual, because I think as you gain their respect, and it's good that you have this last.
Yeah.
Then they're going to listen.
Well, and it's true. You should say that, because what would happen is when I'm on the phone or a meeting with a guy, I go, everybody needs a framework for which they operate their life. And here's what I have found after working with hundreds and hundreds of men, that we have 5 areas of our life, personal, business, financial, relational, and if it works for you, spiritual.
All right.
And that would give them the well, yeah, it does.
Sure.
Those-
Very few people would
Yeah.
not consider themselves spiritual.
Yeah. In fact,
I'm not religious, but
yeah,
I'm spiritual.
Exactly. Well, you know what? That's great, because you know what the Bible says about religion?
Mhm.
Calls it filthy rags. And so that's our,
Yep.
but I just wanted to share with you.
Yeah, and this ministry I'm with, I mean, this is why we do what we do, is we focus on educating them, and we focus on their health care, and we focus on economic development, and we focus on community development. But all of that is all just a reason to be up against them and alongside them while we're giving the gospel.
Yeah.
So, while they're in the eye clinic, they're hearing the gospel, because it's the means by which, and I think that's why God wanted us to do this kind of stuff. And so here, by helping them not only gain respect for you, but respect for themselves, then when that spiritual component comes in, then it's got a place. Because and for whatever reason, I guess it's because the gospel camp meeting kind of thing, and the whole street evangelism idea is that we lead with the spiritual. And I love D. James Kennedy, his E3 program, the Evangelism Explosion. He says that's backwards. It's like walking up to somebody and say, "How's your spleen?"
Yeah.
You don't have the right to ask them those questions. This is a deeply personal kind of thing. Develop that relationship first. Develop a context, and then your words will have meaning, instead of leading with the spiritual all the time. So I like that you have the S on the end right before the conclusion, especially as it. But then you can preface it, by letting them know.
Yeah, it's kind
you
of.
need to know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a thread.
Yep.
That's carried.
And you can
through
tell them that
everything.
right up here, at the beginning of the book, right before you do your acknowledgments.
Mm-hmm.
You tell them, that, here's why I'm writing this book, is what prompted me to do this. Because I saw all this going on, I saw it in my own life, started to put this into effect. I also found at the age of 27 that trying to do all this stuff without the cross is irrelevant.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yep.
I tried.
Yeah. Right.
This gave meaning, and this is why when you come to the end of the road, you have the regrets. So you don't have regrets over here.
Mm-hmm.
It's regrets that you didn't leave with more behind of significance. Boy, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I like
and
that.
So then you can talk about how when you learned that, then it came back.
Yes.
You came back and then started infusing that into everything else that you did.
It's exactly true. I mean, that is exactly the way it happened.
So then, you got your bad story. You're exposing the problem, talking about the good story, and how we're going to help you have one of these good stories. Then, into chapter 2, you've got Paretos Principle. You're going to talk about that, and then you'll give the overview of the 5 areas, and then you're going to encourage them at that point to don't focus on your area of strength, focus on your area of weakness, go to the one, and you might have, at this point, you might have in your workbook, you might have that worksheet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have your workbook, reference that worksheet
Mm-hmm.
and how to use it, and then you can use your instructions in your workbook of how to use the worksheet. And by the way, here's how your book and workbook work together. You do all your teaching and exposition in here,
Right.
but you don't tell them how to use the worksheets here unless you don't have a workbook. If you have a workbook, this is where you do that. And you're going to be asking them the personal questions. So if you have a principle here that you're trying to drive at, here's where you get them to evaluate their life in a personal way to apply that principle.
Okay.
So, say for instance, in the financial area right here, one of your exercises might be go get your bank book or download a Quicken, print out a Quicken report, and let's divide them up into these categories, and so you're doing that because you're trying to get at this principle that where are you carving out your money for God?
Right.
Where are you carving out your money for the future or whatever? Are you doing that first? Or are you doing it last? So you have the principle in mind that you're trying to get them at.
Sure.
So you're actually having them do that so that then you can have them work out that principle themselves here with the worksheet.
Yeah, in fact, when I go through, the 5 areas of our, life, what I talk about is, in each one I give like 2 or 3 bullet points, I would say. In the personal life, most men don't have goals. They don't have a legacy they're trying to create. They're a little bit out of shape and a little bit overweight. They don't have the energy that they want. Okay? Business perspective, even though their whole life is wrapped up in business, doesn't mean it's successful, and they don't have a business, the business has them. Financially, we know that we're spending more than we make. We're not saving, we're going in further debt. Relationally, if all of our time is spent in business, our relationships are catastrophic. And spiritually, the Bible says we should give God our first fruits, but yet we give him our crumbs and our leftovers. So let's see over here, so that little piece is what you're saying is the attachment between here and here. Let's see why we're giving him our crumbs and our leftovers. How are you spending your money? Now, if you did this instead of that, can you see how you can give him your first fruits instead of that?
Right.
So you make it actionable.
Right. So when you're in here, you're going to be talking about the principles, and along the way, you can say, by the way, refer to the workbook, page so-and-so, or worksheet so-and-so. And they'll go there, and you don't have to make your workbook chapter by chapter. You can make your workbook, just
it's gonna be section by
exercise by exercise.
Sure.
So that you can say, go to exercise 4.
Right.
Because you may tell them, back here, go to exercise 2.
Sure.
Depending on.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because they may not be, they don't have to align perfectly. So if you have 8 chapters in your book, you don't have to have 8 chapters in your workbook.
Got it. I see what you're saying.
Your workbook can be just as long as it needs to be to do the exercises, because you want to make it as economical as possible.
Absolutely. And one of the funny things is I've done so many programs, and from the recommendation in the program, okay, recommendation, here's what I recommend. You go to, exercise 3, and you do X, Y, and Z. What will happen is, and I've really become very keen to what I call the, here's the dot, here's the dot, here's the dot, here's the crack or crevice, here's the dot, here's the dot, here's the result or outcome. I've become very keen to see where this thing lies, that crack or the crevice that stops the connectivity, stops you from getting the result. And one of those things is they don't have access, or they haven't developed the habit of hard work. So they would not do that and therefore not get the result. So what I will often say, I'll say, have you read the book Good to Great? No, I haven't. Well, let me give you it in a nutshell. Good is the enemy of great. Got it? You got the principle. So when it comes to utilizing something like this worksheet, I want to make sure that we preemptively know that this is going to happen, and depending on the lethargy of the individual, they're going to quit. So they're going to quit somewhere along those action steps.
And that needs to be something that you say in here.
That's correct. So what I wanted to say is, in connecting this thing from here to here, I have to preemptively tell them this is one of those things. I'm going to quit, right? Before I get the outcome. So, for example, you could download all your spreadsheets. You can look at your budget. You could, analyze it 7 ways to Sunday. Here's what I can tell you. If you want to give God your first fruits instead of your leftovers, give to him first.
Right.
That's the action step.
Right.
Give it to them first. I can tell you, you're going to go back and you're going to see you're spending more than you think you are, right? You're eating out more than you think you are. It's more of your budget than you think it is, right? And if you want to do this, then here's what you take. Take my recommendation. Just give it to them first. See?
Right.
So I just wanted to get that concept fleshed out because that's how, when I sat with David Helfman, right, we were on the phone 30 minutes and I taught him 3 principles to be a ninja in efficiency at work. Those 3 principles in 30 minutes, he took the bullet points notes, he did it at work, got the result he was trying to achieve. He went to an 8-hour workshop with guys that teach efficiency for 8 hours. He said, I learned more in a half hour and got a better result in 8 hours. That's what I want to make sure happens.
Yep.
So hold me to, you know, where would you fall off, right?
Well, see, to me, that's something that that's a principle you need to talk about in this chapter.
Yes.
You've got Pareto's law, so you're kind of giving them hope because that's hopeful to me.
Totally.
Okay. Another one would be, this principle. I mean, do you have a name for that?
Well, in the business world, I just call it uncovering the cracks and crevices. I call it connecting the dots of understanding. But I think really what it would be is accelerating a result or something along those lines. I mean,
yeah, I mean, here, anywhere and it might be that this will be you'll take the same principle and apply it several times just in different ways.
Yeah.
But you can uncover that principle here and let them know, everybody has one of these. It's just a matter of figuring out where it is.
Yeah.
And the successful people learn how to span that gap.
Yes.
So, but you can't span it if you don't know where it is. So figure out where it is for yourself and then span it. But so once you've got Pareto's, you're going to have that principle here, somewhere in here.
It would be, stick-to-itiveness, persistency. We would say pain precipitates change. So there's going to be pain somewhere.
There's something else that happens. There's usually a lot of shame there.
Yeah.
And so we tend to avoid our shame.
Good
So we
point.
don't look at it, and so that becomes the classic blind spot. So then, the successful people are the ones who are secure enough to look at their blind spots and aren't driven off by that shame. They gut it out.
That's exactly it. They gut it out. And so again,
They gut out the shame part, and by looking at it, they are able to embrace it, accept it, and then overcome it.
So again, one of the hallmark principles is we have to remember we're in a battle. Okay? Battle for you first, for your influence second. That battle is going to rear its ugly head because here's what the adversary doesn't want. He doesn't want this because this means significance. So he's going to pound you. One way he's going to pound you is with shame. Another way he's going to pound you is with, I don't have time or it's too painful.
Okay? That right there is that right there.
That's what I'm trying to say. Is I was trying to pull the bullet points of which,
Yep.
and again, it's
So the Pareto's law, we're going to focus on the areas that are where you make the biggest difference in your life when you focus on your areas of weakness. So let's do that. Knowing where your areas of weaknesses. You could talk about that here and the fact that you're in a battle. He doesn't want that result, and the way he's going to do that is shame. And one of the things that I like to say to Satan really only has one weapon, and it's deception.
yeah,
That's all he has. It's what he used in the garden. It's what he's used ever since.
that's a good point.
And shame is essentially a deception. It's a deception that says that you are defined by your weaknesses.
Yes.
And you are not. God says you are not.
Yeah.
And so that gives you the courage to look at your areas of shame or areas of weakness and embrace those and go, I'm fallen just like the rest of the world, Romans 3:23. So, that gives me the courage to look at that area of weakness and overcome that deception and get past that shame to look at it. And then these other areas like, I'm not adequate. I mean, one of the things that I know that guys struggle with is they don't want to go. Don't want to work on their legs. They've got weak legs because they don't feel adequate there.
Yeah.
You're not.
And if I
None of us are.
And if I don't acknowledge the fact that I don't have weak legs, they don't exist.
Right. Right.
If you want to talk about
Yeah, it's a dog
deception,
hiding his head under the
yeah, exactly. I call it
couch
the
and-
ostrich syndrome.
There you go.
That's what I call it, the ostrich syndrome. But one of the things that we're talking about, and thank you for allowing me to just ferret out some of these things, because these are important as they line themselves up, would be I teach continuums a lot. So I think what you're saying is the adversary has one weapon, right?
Mm.
Deception. So these are the things that I teach. I teach fear, courage, doubt, certainty. So in other words, he's going to get us to be over here at fear. That's his deception. You can't do that. No. In fact, if anybody knew that about you, you'd be shameful.
Right.
So we're coming over here. So it's cool because this is part of that workbook thing where we go, well, where are you on the fear, courage continuum? Oh man, I'm like way over here. I'm a 2. I'm way towards fear. Okay, well why? Well, because I've got that. I don't want anybody to know about my life. So anyway, those are some of the things that we build on as we move forward. Just check here. We're looking good. If I pull back, I can actually get more of that. Yep, we got it.
Yeah, and the story, is the negative story. The problem, is, that life, regret.
No margin.
Right, those, so you're gonna spell out the problem, then, story of success, and then overview, preview the book.
Okay.
So that's what you'll do. That's what we just talked about here. And then chapter 2. And then the enemy warfare,
That's just what I just call it the battle.
deception,
Yeah.
and then
Cracks, crevices, result.
and
Good.
result success is what you got here.
The result.
So then you're going to encourage them and to focus. You're going to you will have let's see, warfare, deception. Let's insert the chapters. Give them a preview of the 5 areas. And then do the connect the dots.
Okay.
Let's see, Paretos Law. No, let's do the 5 areas before. So do the 5 areas here. So Paretos Law, 5 areas you're going to focus on, using Paretos Law to focus on that area. And you can talk about how the Paretos Law is hopeful. And then the 5 areas. And of course, as you flesh this out, as you write it, as you work it out, if it isn't flowing, you just reverse it.
Sure.
It's just
Well, it's
your battle plan.
A concept.
They always
with
change once the battle starts.
and- Yeah.
All right, so you got your 5 areas, and then you'll talk about how the enemy will want you to not focus on your area of weakness. Using the enemy warfare deception concept, and then the connect the dots thing with the gap, and then challenge them. With this right here, to have the courage to do what successful people do, and that's to focus on their find that gap and to span it. And then, there are different ways that you can span that gap. Part of it is, at least this is in my own life, so I'm kind of adding content here, but, there are different ways to span that gap. Sometimes it's personal development,
Right.
which is what they're going to be doing here. Sometimes it's recognizing that that's just always going to be a weakness for you, and so you staff to your weakness, so you can get help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have other people do that. So if you're not a good organizer, get somebody to do your organization for you.
Yeah, we call that delegating the areas of weakness. You got to get it handled,
Right.
right?
So then it's about creatively finding a way to bridge that gap, because you may not ever, if you stink at math, that's, you can go get math classes, or you can spend that time, working on some other area of life and then staff to that weakness, or put something in place, technology or whatever, to span that gap. But then the idea is successful people don't let that just sit there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me. Can I just pause you for 1 sec?
Go for it.
Let me just stop this.